Okay, this will be part 2 for Manifest Destiny and its legacy. I apologize for the audio. I forgot my microphone. But we're going to look at today the second half of this chapter. We should have, in class, watched a little video, maybe read some articles. And we'll get started. Let's see. Trying something different here today. We'll get started down here with Polk and misunderstandings in Mexico. So right here. Oop. Okay. So the big thing for Polk, right, is he wants to add California and Texas. He's a big expansionist. That's kind of what Polk is going to be known for. The big problem, as we probably have looked at in class, or we haven't looked at in class yet, but we will be the dispute over the border between Texas and Mexico. As we'll read in Polk's actual orders to Slidell here, that the ambassador to Mexico will be that there's no question over Texas's independence / legitimacy as part of the United States, but that the border will have to be hashed out, and that the border kind of goes all the way back to when it was part of Louisiana, pre-Louisiana Purchase, and all that sort of stuff. We're going to say that the Rio Grande is the border, right? Or they'll refer to it in the article or the document as the Del Norte, and the Spanish, or the Mexicans, I should say, will want the Nueces River. And so there's going to be some area between the two, right, that is going to be sort of a no man's land. And Polk is effectively going to order his troops into that region, kind of instigating a war. Now, let's see if we go. So, after the intervention, or after the conflict between the two sides, there's going to be dead Americans, and since now you have dead Americans, right, Polk is going to send the war message to Congress, and they will vote, as it says right there, overwhelmingly for war. Guys like Abraham Lincoln are going to call for what we refer to as spot resolutions, right? So much so that Lincoln's current nickname, instead of Honest Abe, will be Spotty Lincoln. And it's basically for the precise spot on American soil where blood was shed, kind of basically, did you send them into Mexican territory and provoke this war? That's why the question right there, right? And the short of it is he sort of did provoke the war, right? Because yet again he's an expansionist, right? And he wants that territory. I can't spell expansion. That's unfortunate. So what the hope was, right, was that they would get Mexico to sell. But in reality, right, Mexico didn't want to sell. And so the war is going to instigate, right, Mexico, in quote, in air quotes there, selling the land. Oh, come on, machine. There we go. So, Polk in Mexico, right, American operations in the Southwest and California were completely successful. Kearny and Fremont, right, had success in the West. Fremont collaborated with American naval officers and local Americans who hoisted the banner of the short-lived American Bear Flag Republic. So what happens is during the Mexican-American War, right, you have Americans in California overthrow the government with the help of the Navy. That's, I believe Kearny is. But Fremont, right, was a mountain man / sort of de facto military officer. And they established this sort of temporary Bear Flag Republic until the U.S. can come up and say, yeah, we want to be a territory, that kind of thing. Now, you got a little preview here of what's going on. You can see most of this stuff's going on in the mid-1840s. Here's the Rio Grande and the Nueces, right, as I was mentioning earlier. Here's your no man's land where the fighting starts. Eventually, right, you'll have Winfield Scott here, right, and you'll have Zach Taylor at Buena Vista. Those are kind of the two major battles. The United States Marines will add their Halsey-Montezuma line, right, by landing at Tampico and Matamoros and at Veracruz. The Mexican-American Wars, we'll see, will be a relatively short war and successful war for the United States, and most of the casualties for the United States will be due to disease. So, kind of just what I just said here, right? You have Winfield Scott at Buena Vista. you're going to have, excuse me, Zach Taylor at Buena Vista. Winfield Scott is going to take Mexico City in 1847. And Santa Anna, who, if you really want to have some fun, go look up in that history about how he kind of comes to power, right? Eventually he will kind of retake over the country, and he will be in charge when the United States Army shows up. And with this, he will sign the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and it will be then sent to the Senate for ratification. Now, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo here, right? It says, conferred American title to Texas. We were already part of the country, but now it's like Mexico can't complain about anything else. It also is going to basically add the western half of the country, right? It was, at the time, about half of what Mexico was, right? And the United States agreed to pay $15 million for the land, right? Which was pretty, let's say, fair at the time, right? Considering they had just won a war, and most of the time they just take it. So by throwing them a little bit of money, that was gracious, we'll say, of Polk. So what's going to happen is he's going to submit the treaty to the Senate. The Senate will have Mexican Whigs and conscious Whigs, right, whatever you want to call them. Basically, these are going to be anti-slavery guys that don't want to add any territory because they know it's going to expand slavery. There were also guys on the other end that were like big-time Manifest Destiny expansionist guys that wanted to add all of Mexico to the country. But clever guys like, say, John C. Calhoun realized that if they added way more territory, that this was going to sort of exacerbate this slavery question even more. So he kind of, the guys in charge of the Whigs, right, not the conscious Whigs, but the other Whigs, kind of like tempered everybody's expectations, said don't be so greedy. And in turn, they only claimed what we know of as the second, sort of the western half of our country. As I said before, right, we pay this $18 million. Critics claimed American had a guilty conscience, right? Apologists pointed out Anglo-Saxon spirit of fair play, right? All in all, I think it was a way just to sort of make sure that they didn't have any sort of recompense at the end and try to come back for something. So, the new territory in the Civil War, as I said before, probably when we started talking about this, that the expansion of this territory is going to be what causes the Civil War eventually. With it, the question over can we have slavery in it? And we'll see how all that plays out in the next chapters. But Wilmot, right, is going to call for what we refer to as the Wilmot Proviso, right? And that idea was that all this new Western territory would not be allowed to have slavery, right? So as it says right here, it never became law, right? It was endorsed by legislatures of free states, right? Symbolized the burning issue over slavery. Southern states obviously were against it. From the perspective of history, that was the opening shots of the Mexican-American War were the opening shots of the Civil War.